Hi, and welcome to the Bouncing Back podcast. I'm your host, Melissa McCurley, and thanks so much for joining us today. If you haven't yet joined our Facebook group, please check out Bouncing Back Professionals Thriving with Chronic Illness. I'm so excited to introduce to you today our guest, Mitch Webb. He's a nervous system and holistic health coach who helps high-performance professionals, like us, to leave things like biohacking and focus on true self-healing strategies that create sustainable change. He has his own journey through his health story, and he's going to share that with us today. Welcome, Mitch.
Melissa, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm grateful for you to be here.
Yeah, same, definitely.
Can you start off by telling us a little bit? I know you do something called somatic strategies. Would you tell us a little bit just about what you do? And then I'd love to hear your personal journey. You had a health journey that brought you to this work. So let's just start there.
Yeah, definitely. I appreciate the opportunity to share my journey and how I help clients. This has been a lifetime body of work for me, stemming from early health issues and constantly looking for answers. And early on, that started off as more of a health coaching practice. I was looking at things like nutrition and exercise, and really found that a personalized approach to that was important. And now, just going down the rabbit hole, found the nervous system health. And for me, that's the root cause of a lot of different chronic diseases that we see out there. People with gut issues, anxiety, autoimmune, sleep issues, things like that. And when we combine the nervous system lens and apply personalization modalities that I've used in the past, people who are experiencing chronic symptoms are able to heal a whole lot faster. And so my job now is to help people connect with their bodies and listen to what's going on with them. And when we have trauma, we tend to disconnect and we don't listen to our body. A lot of times we're listening to the external. And that's a big part of this, is just doing it your way instead of relying on somebody else telling you what to do. And speaking of my journey, it started with traumatic brain injuries. And that kind of woke up or revealed the level of dysregulation that was underneath that was coming from childhood. So it's like the iceberg analogy, or the calm duck waiting on top of the water. It looks calm, but underneath, those legs are going crazy. And so that's what was going on for me, is there was this early developmental, dysregulated, unprocessed trauma that came to the surface after a big accident where I had a TBI. And then I started having panic attacks and insomnia and autoimmune, and later had moved into a house that had black mold. I developed Lyme disease. I got better and I got hit by a dump truck and totaled my car. And then I got long haul COVID. And it's like, I think all of these things were attracted to me for me to wake up and to see that iceberg and to be able to heal that.
Yeah, that's a lot. That's a lot. Wow. Well, it's so encouraging to me to hear you say, not that I'm glad that you have Lyme, but the health things you've been through, and you're clearly so fit today, so energetic. You would never think that. I have my own journey of autoimmune disease. I have several. I don't have Lyme, but you know that process, as do my listeners, whatever their whatever their chronics are. And so just hearing that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, that you don't just have to find a way to endure, but that you can really have recovered health is very encouraging. So when you talk about the nervous system, I've got to be honest, this is a little bit of a new piece of it for me. I've spent a lot of time in gut health. We've talked about gut, diet, all this kind of stuff. Can you clarify what part of the body we're talking about and systemically how that connects?
Yeah, so the nervous system connects to all the different systems of the body. You got your immune system, your digestion, circulation, hormones, brain health, you name it. And so when we are dysregulated, which just means that we're stuck, we're getting stuck in high activation. That would be things like anxiety, or we're shutting down, and that's going to be more of a freeze response and going to be more associated with autoimmune disease. But we're basically bouncing back and forth between these two. And so when we're stuck in hyperactivity or we're shut down, all of these symptoms start to show up. And I was just like you. Certainly, we hear in medicine, everything starts in the gut. And so then we go to treat the gut. And in my case, what I found is that the more I treated the gut, the more symptoms I got. And when I started to do this work and I started to meet the emotions, the stored sensations, the symptoms in a different way, like without trying to fix them and trying to meet these emotions and let them express themselves like they wanted to, one of the first things that started happening to me in session that was really interesting, and at this time, I was eating one meal a day. I was eating only meat and salt, and I lost 40 pounds. So I was down to about 150 pounds at the time. And about a month or two into doing somatic experiencing work and working with my mentor, Irene Lyons' course around the nervous system healing, I started burping like crazy in session. And basically what's going on there is the fascia holds a lot of this trauma and tension. We hear in the book, The Body Keeps the Score. Well, the body, you may not cognizant or consciously remember these things, but the body is holding all of that. And so when I started to quit trying to fix that stuff and figure it out, and I started moving towards it and expressing that anger and the grief and the fear and all the things that came with living in a scary environment as a child, my gut started healing. And so for me, same thing with exercise. I wasn't able to exercise, and about 3 months into this, accidentally did an hour worth of yard work, and that's what kind of started to build more capacity in my nervous system.
Wow, that's amazing. And so does this connect into parasympathetic and sympathetic? Is that the nervous system? Are we talking about the same thing?
Yeah.
Or is one a not symptom of the other, or is it the same thing? Because that's terminology I hear come up a lot in my reading and research, and we've had some other speakers who've touched on that. Is that in the same ballpark?
Yeah, so there's two branches. There's the parasympathetic. People will call that rest and digest. Within the parasympathetic, there's also two other branches. There's the ventral, which is social engagement. And then there's the dorsal, which is going to be, there's high tone dorsal and there's low tone dorsal. High tone is going to be more collapse and freeze, and the low tone is more like calm and digest, sleep. And then on the other side of that, you've got the sympathetic nervous system. People will say fight or flight. And so that's just the higher activation. We're constantly moving between the two, depending on what life and our environment throws at us. And in a healthy nervous system, we're going to move through those different expressions and move right back to what's called our window of tolerance. And what happens in a dysregulated nervous system is we just get stuck in one or the other. And typically we have a primary where we spend most of the time, and then a secondary that we isolate between two. So that may be someone who has a lot of activation at nighttime, let's say, and then during the day they're really tired. And so they may be in more of a functional freeze during the day and then coming up to sympathetic activation at nighttime.
Okay, that makes perfect sense. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Somatic techniques. I know that's one of the tools in your toolbox. Can you tell us what those are? Maybe an example of what one of those exercises or activities would be, what that looks like?
Yeah, sure. So somatic just means body. And the difference between CBT, like cognitive behavioral therapy, and somatic is really just connecting with the body. So we can spend a lot of time in our head analyzing the past, what happened to us. And I think that has its place and its time. And then once we've built the capacity and the awareness of our past, for me at least, I felt more stuck because I wasn't meeting the survival patterns and parts of myself that I had suppressed. And so what I mean by that is, let me just write down, there's parts work. So when I say parts, these are the parts of us that were deemed not allowed, that may have been punished, may have been suppressed. For a boy, that may be more feminine qualities, or what society deems feminine, like maybe singing and dancing or expressing themselves emotionally. And so we say, hey, boys don't do that. And so they learn, okay, if I'm going to get love and attention, I'm not going to express these traits. They're inherently me. So we shut down those traits. And then we get a chronic illness in our 30s, our 40s, and we start to see these different patterns, these survival techniques, if you will, that we've taken on to maintain love, to get attention. That could be things like perfection and people pleasing, intellectualization. That's a big one for me, which is trying to figure things out and fix things. That's where the biohacking really work with that type of response. And we think these are us. We think that we are people pleasers and perfect, and society rewards these things until it's really going against our body, our impulses. When we have trauma, we disconnect from the body and we don't listen. And so when our body is telling us something's safe, let's move towards it, or it's not, let's move away from it. The more we ignore that, the louder it becomes, and that's where symptoms come from. And so we may work with the part that feels abandoned, the part that feels it needs to perform, that it can't be authentic. And so underneath that people pleasing, let's say, there can be grief, there can be anger, there can be all these different emotions that need to be expressed. And so we do that in a very titrated way. And I think we're taught from an early age this Band-Aid response. And so if we have a boo-boo, we want to fix it. And instead, a lot of this work is being with and allowing. And when we can get into these parts, we allow them to express and do what they needed to. So maybe if somebody needed to fight or run away, they can act that out in therapy, and the body will shake, it will tremble, you have all kinds of different noises and expression come out, and that's just what needed to be expressed at the time, and that's that energy leaving the body. And so that's working with the parts, and working with the sensations in the body, and doing it in a very titrated, slow way, because all of this is new and it can be overwhelming, and if we do too much in a session, it can lead to more symptoms. And so it's really going slow and putting the Band-Aid analogy up, and also like the Amazon Prime, like the quick fix. This is more of a lifestyle type of approach.
Right. This didn't originate overnight. It's probably not going to get ameliorated overnight either.
Exactly.
Wow. So that's truly like work that's hacking at the root, that I can see how that's so full circle. There's so many things I want to ask you. There's so much here. I'm trying to decide what order to ask. Can you give us, I do want to get back to biohacking and some of the limitations that you see, because that's such a buzzword. I know I listen to the Huberman podcast. I love stuff. A lot of people in my community like that. And I think, like you said, that can have its place, but that's not really healing work. That might be dialing in. That's like a little tool, not a strategy.
Right.
But I guess let's start with that since I opened that. What are you seeing in that, and how are you seeing maybe people who need to do deeper work perhaps use that in a limiting way?
It's our society, right? It's this capitalistic society that we got to make money to pay for things, right? And so we take the ancient modalities like breath work and cold exposure, sauna, grounding, and we monetize it and we water it down, and we take the essence out of it, and it becomes more of a compulsive response to illness. And so it feels like busy work to me. And ultimately, it's more of a state shift, and it's an avoidance of the deeper wounds and patterns that have created the illness. And so we can dance around it and avoid it and get really busy and get into this cycle of fixing ourselves and figuring out and looking for what's wrong, and which just puts us into a hypervigilant state. And even I would call that a sensitized nervous system, where everything is a threat and we're constantly trying to manage how we feel. And society has all these sexy options that says, hey, if you want to work harder, then do these things. And this work is not about working harder. It's about meeting and surrender and allowing and really learning to sit in discomfort. And there's a top down, there's the brain-based approach, and there's the body-based approach. And these things can certainly be helpful. I got in a sauna right before we hopped on here. It helps me feel good. But I'm not relying on it for my healing. I'm not doing breath work every day until I turn blue in the face. I'm not fasting for 7 days in a row or taking 100 supplements every time I have a meal. I used to do those things.
You're describing my life.
I know. I'm right there with you, sister. And I've had to unlearn a lot of those patterns over these last couple of years. And let me say this, too. It's not to shame or say that it's bad. It makes a lot of sense if you're uncomfortable and you're dealing with symptoms to want comfort, to want relief, to want a freaking break sometimes. And what I had to do for that, and what I'm currently doing right now with those things, is I put them on a calendar. I schedule them So I'm not constantly doing them throughout the day or constantly thinking about what's wrong. I'm basically sending the signal to my body, to my nervous system that, hey, I'm safe and I'll do these things when they're scheduled instead of feeling like I have to constantly be doing. I don't know if you ever felt like that, but for me, when I found something that worked, I would get obsessive about it and it became a compulsive response to it that basically kept me avoiding it and kept me stuck with my symptoms.
So I hear you saying it's as much about the way you approach something and the sort of story that you wrap around it that affects your nervous system. Like a sauna is one of my big tools, and like I have an infrared sauna at my house. But yeah, I could see how I could get like I have to do it every day, and if I don't do it every day, I would then, and that would put a lot of stress.
There you go.
I don't do that, but I could see how you could do that, and yeah, and it comes from being a healthy tool to another thing on a to-do list that becomes unrealistic that then creates stress.
Yeah,
for sure. Can you give us an example of a transformation you had with a client, a breakthrough, like a strategy, maybe a limitation they had or something and problem, and then something you applied and then how that broke free for them?
So a guy that comes to mind, one of the first guys I worked with, so I was more health coaching, people were doing more like weight loss and biohacking with me. And then I started moving towards this nervous system approach. And he was the first person I tried these things out with. And he showed up on day one. He had pain in his shoulder. He lives here close to me, and we were able to meet in person and do a workout. And
oh, nice.
He was doing a dumbbell press, and his shoulder, oh, my shoulder's hurting. And I said, oh, how long has that been going on? It's been 5 or 6 years. So I'm like, dude, let's get you to a chiropractor. And so we sent him to a chiropractor, and 6 months goes by, and nothing's getting better. He's like, I think it's actually getting worse. And so we're having a session one day, and he's telling me, I'm trying to get him to walk after meals or something like that. And I'm just so tired at the end of the day. When I get home, now he had his neck and his shoulders in a lot of tension as he told this. For the audience that can't see me, my shoulders are up near my ears right now. And so I said, how often is that going on? And he wasn't aware of it. And so he was disconnected from that sensation, that tension in his body. And so basically he told me, we sat with that, somatics to get him to feel that more, we just felt it contracting and relaxing. And so basically what I had him do was build awareness that next week and tell me when you do this. And so he came back a week later, and he's like, I do it when I'm in meetings and they're really stressful and I don't want to be there. And so I just kind of zone out, and I find that I'm holding a lot of tension in my body that way. And I said, okay, cool. So what I want you to do this week is be aware of that. When they start to creep up on your ears, your shoulders creep up on your ears, and just slowly let them drop a little bit. And when you're in these meetings, can you feel your butt in the chair? Can you look around the room and find some colors? Can you hear what's going on, smell, taste? So basically we're bringing our senses on board. This is called orienting. This brings us into our environment instead of what we typically do is we live in our head. We think our way to safety by avoiding what happened last week or preparing for the worst possible scenario. Both situations put our nervous system into a hypervigilant state. And so we're going to notice all of that stress. We're going to come back to the body. We're going to use our senses to connect with our environment. And I didn't know if this would land. I thought, man, this is also a man that was not interested in doing any type of therapy. I remember recommending.
What? A man that didn't want to do therapy? You're kidding.
Imagine that.
So I've never heard of such a thing.
Yeah, exactly. I'm like, all right, I'm just gonna start working this stuff in without really making it therapy. And so he blew my mind because he came back the next week. I said, how's it going? And I expected there to be a lot of back and forth and not a lot happening. And he fired 2 or 3 people at his office.
Wow.
He said this is like a really good guy that made a ton of money and had a bunch of vultures basically around him, feeding off of him, if you will. And
gosh,
he recognized that because he's aware. So he got them out. He had 2 or 3 friends that he quit being friends with because they were doing the same thing. They were pulling all of his energy. They were a pain in the ass. I think he was there's so many things that were happening that he wasn't aware of. And so he was able to make better business deals. He was able to regulate and be aware of what's going on at the business and get the people out of the business that were causing a problem. Same thing for his personal life. And that awareness is what this work is. It's the ultimate red pill. And it starts with us, and it moves out into our relationships, our family, our business. And it's a big waking up, even society, seeing what's going on with society and how we're being controlled and poisoned and separated and stressed out so that we can be controlled. And so it's quite the journey, and it's unpacking a lot. And that, again, just to reiterate, that's why we go really slow and we titrate and we build awareness so that eventually we follow our impulse. When we can listen to our body, we become our own medicine. Because if you're in a chronic disease situation, everybody wants to sell you something. They've got a pill, they've got a diet, they've got a biohack, they've got a class or a course that they want you to go to. And when you do this work and you start listening to your body, this becomes noise, and we start tuning into our body, and that's where the healing is. At least that's what it was for me, and I see it time and time again with the clients that I work with.
That's an incredible story. Thank you for sharing that with your client. Particularly for people who are business owners, we are our business. So our business is only going to excel to the degree that we're healthy and that we excel. And we all have probably limits on what we're doing that we don't even see. And I know a lot of us invest in personal growth and always try to grow that. But it makes sense. That's such a great example of how your own trauma, unprocessed feelings can blind you to probably things that were really visible to other people in his life, with those people around him that were sucking off of his energy, business and personal. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. How cool that he was so receptive to it too. You did Jetta then though. Kudos.
Oh, it was the convincing client that this is the work I want to do, that I'm not the only one that's benefiting from this. It was kind of the proof in the pudding.
Yeah. That's powerful. I know you have a blog. I was reading last night. By the way, Mitch has an amazing, those of you who travel, on his website and his blog, he's got an amazing list of things to do to help with jet lag. I love those tips. Thank you so much. I do the molecularized hydrogen also for energy. So it was cool to see that. I was like, okay, so Mitch approves of that one. Okay, cool. So just a wealth of resources. Can you tell people where they can learn more about you, where they can find you, and more about your work and your strategies?
Yeah, sure. I appreciate that. My website,
if
you're mentioning that, is mitchwebb.com. I've got a podcast, the Rude Conversations podcast. I just started. You can find that.
Congratulations.
Thank you. You can find that on my YouTube page, Mitch Webb Health Coaching, and I'm on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and just started TikTok.
Oh Lord, good luck.
Yeah, I know, right?
You're on I was on it for a couple of months and I had to get off for the aforementioned thing you mentioned about healthy things and whatever.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So kudos for you for braving that jungle. But I know a lot of people get a lot of good exposure and following and connect with more people on there.
Definitely.
That's fantastic. Thanks so much. So a question I always like to ask is, for some of my listeners who are maybe in that place with their chronic illness journey where they are living day to day still. They're in the pain. They've had to surrender things like a job, maybe an important relationship, and they're really not to a building point yet. What words or insights would you have for them to help them through this phase into the reality that there is really a light at the end of the tunnel?
The thing that I think about is that our bodies there's nothing wrong with them, and they're never sick. I think we got symptoms confused with there's something wrong. And symptoms are just the body's way of communicating. And so if that's the case, that can bring a little bit more trust into the system that, hey, that whatever's thrown at me, my body can handle. It's intelligent, it's healing. These symptoms are a response to healing. And the more we can accept that, the more we can feel more safe in uncertainty. And then if somebody's dealing with a persistent symptom, a lot of times we tend to move away from that. We want to get away from it, change it, fix it. And my 2 cents would be, can you move towards it? Feel where do you notice that in the body? And what does it remind you of? Is there an image? Is there a color? Is there a temperature? Is there something that comes to mind? And can you say thank you to it? Can we say, hey, you're allowed to be here right now? And if once we've done that, I like to think of maybe a pet or someone that you really love and get that feeling in your body of love. And can we direct that towards the pain, towards the symptom, and let it know it's okay to be here, that it doesn't need to change or fix, and maybe have a couple of breaths with it. The more we can meet these symptoms, allow them to be here without trying to change them or fix them, and know that our body is trying to heal and is healing, and these symptoms are healing symptoms, not something to fix. There's just less gripping in the system, less hypervigilance, more safety and trust.
Wow, I love that. I literally felt my body relax as you were saying that.
Yeah.
Completely. Those are beautiful words. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much, Mitch. This has been wonderful. I'm so excited to share you and your information out to my tribe. Yeah. And so thanks so much.
My pleasure.
Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for joining the Bouncing Back podcast. Please share and review. It helps us get this podcast out. It helps us so much. And I'll be back in 2 more weeks with more tools, strategies, and inspiring stories. So until then, keep bouncing back. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of the Bouncing Back podcast. Professionals thriving with chronic illness. I hope you found inspiration and actionable takeaways to support you on your journey. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who might need a little encouragement today. Remember, thriving with chronic illness is possible. You are stronger than you think. Until next time, take care and keep bouncing